Joining us now is Senator Rob Sampson. Busy week at the State House. What's going on, Rob?
Good afternoon, Todd. Glad to join you.
How's life as a senator compared to being a representative? Does it feel very different?
Not so far. Today was my very first opportunity to debate and speak on the Senate floor regarding legislation, and I'm glad I had that opportunity, and it's behind me now.
But it's kind of lonely, isn't it? There's so many fewer people around.
I was the only, there's 36 state senators, although at the moment there's fewer than that because there's a number of people that took jobs in the Lamont administration that have yet to be replaced, which will happen in special elections coming up sometime at the end of February.
Okay, tolls, we just had the call from Kathy about the NoTollsCT.org movement. And I wonder if you want to share anything about your feelings about tolls, Senator Sampson.
Certainly. You and I have talked about this a number of times, and I'm absolutely opposed to putting any new taxes or regulation on the constituents that I represent or any citizens in Connecticut, and tolls are simply another tax. I'm sure you've heard that. You probably said that. What I've heard so far up here is Lamont, as our incoming governor, repeatedly say that he only wants to tax trucks, but there is legislation that has been put forward by some of the members, including a freshman state senator, Alexandra Bergstein, who says she wants to toll everyone. So we'll have to see what happens. I'm quite certain there'll be a debate in the Transportation Committee, and I would not be surprised if we're voting in both the House and Senate before long on a tolls proposal for cars and trucks.
Is there a feeling amongst Republicans in the Senate that that's the inevitable thing, that the whole Democratic power structure is geared up for tolls on everybody, and whatever the governor says is neither here nor there?
Well, the governor does not have a veto-proof majority in either chamber. And as a result, he has a lot of power. And if he's going to stand in the way of the progressive Democrats that seem to be running the show in both the House and Senate these days, he's going to have to stand firm. I mean, I've heard some things out of the governor which I actually appreciate. Certainly, he's a liberal Democrat, and he's going to disagree with me pretty significantly on almost everything. But one thing about the governor that makes him different than legislators individually is that he has to live within reality. Individual legislators can go pander to their own districts, and they don't have to worry about the fallout, about whether the budget is actually balanced or what the ramifications of their policy ideas are.
Right, so they can promise freebies, they can oppose the governor's ideas and push their own. And
that's correct.
He doesn't have much to beat them up with.
Yeah, he has to balance the budget. I mean, this is not the federal government. The state budget has to be balanced, at least on paper. I mean,
yeah. Well,
let's certainly debate how that goes.
Yeah, let's talk more about that when we continue. Rob Sampson is here. He was a House member, and now he's in the Senate after one of the good news stories of last November's elections. 860-522-9842. Rob Sampson is a newly sworn-in senator. And what are the towns and villages and cities you represent, Rob?
I represent the entirety of the towns of Southington, Wolcott, and Prospect, and parts of Cheshire and Waterbury.
Okay. Nice area. A lot of
Beautiful
variety.
Area. Best part of the whole state.
Well, of course it is. You represent it, so it's certainly the smartest part, right?
Indeed.
All right. So the budget and the balancing of the budget. And you said that truism, technically, you stated that the state budget has to be balanced because there isn't a borrowing power like the federal government that can run up $20 trillion and not be concerned about it. They can just borrow money. But is that really true?
There is a borrowing power, for sure, and they have abused that. But at the same time, we can't print money. And at least on paper, the budget has to be balanced. Of course, there's a lot of games that they play. Governor Malloy was very, very skilled at modifying the terms of how a budget is actually calculated. When I was first elected, the state budget was around $17 billion, and it included the money that we received as a state from the federal government in the form of Medicaid dollars. which was around $3 billion at the time. Governor Malloy very cleverly took that Medicaid number and said, well, that shouldn't really count towards our budget because that's a whole separate thing, and put it off to the side. So today, even though our budget is over $20 billion, it's actually far more than that because it doesn't even include the calculation for Medicaid, which may be $5 billion today.
Okay, so
if
it's
you're
really
talking about apples to apples. Our budget has gone up 50%.
From what year are you talking about when you started?
2011 was my first session.
Okay, so over the Malloy years, it went up. It went up like 25%.
At least. I don't know what the exact calculation is, but it is substantial. And our unfunded pension obligations and liabilities have gone up dramatically as well. The per capita debt has gone up. It's a complete disaster. The amount that the state borrows every year for bonding has gone up dramatically. They used to bond, $1.5 billion a year. Now it's something like $3 billion a year. And Governor Malloy has refinanced that debt over and over again. If you remember last session, they added $14 billion to the amount we owe in long-term obligations just to lower the two final budget years of his tenure so that he could balance the budget. Lots of bad policy, and it's going to take a lot to fix it.
So despite what you said at the beginning, that the state can't spend money it doesn't have technically, because it can't print money, it can't borrow huge amounts like from overseas and stuff like that. Nevertheless, they figured out a way to trick us and have some things that aren't really being paid for that are being made part of policy.
Precisely. Yeah. No. I mean, and we were supposed to have a spending cap. A lot of my colleagues will take credit for putting a spending cap and a bonding cap in the last state budget, but of course they were done statutorily, which means that when this budget is passed, they can easily be changed to a new law. The only real protection the taxpayers of this state would have is a constitutional amendment that very clearly states that the state has to abide by a legitimate spending cap and to define what is included in that spending cap, because Governor Malloy, like I said, he was very clever. In order to go around the spending cap, he basically took things and made them separate from the budget so he could spend more.
Senator Rob Sampson is our guest. So this really angers me, this tricking of the people, because these are our hired representatives, as you are. You have an obligation to us. Don't you feel this way, that you have a fiduciary responsibility to tell us what's going on, not to con us?
Absolutely, 100%, and I try and carry myself that way every day, Todd.
Well, that's my sense of how you behave. So how would you run if you were to run for governor someday, which I hope you do. I hope you get in that position.
I wouldn't count on it.
Well, I hope you get in a position where you can make it happen. But I don't know how you run for governor and tell the truth, because it's such a can of worms that what people do when they get into politics at that level is they tell stories. And the stories are designed to align them with their parties and not to contradict narratives that voters already believe. Like if you're a Democrat and you don't admit what the problem is with the budget, if you don't say right out, which the governor is admitting sort of blandly, that the state is in crisis because of the CBAC agreement and the commitments that have been made to the unions, the amount of debt that's been run up because it hasn't been financed. He gets those words out at times. But that is an imperative, an emergency the state faces, and some emergency action is required. How do you not say that to people?
Right. I say it as much as I possibly can.
Yes, because you're not on the side that created it and requires that people not notice how bad things are.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say that the Democrats have controlled the legislature pretty much over the last 40 years and are largely responsible for the damage done to our state's economy and the poor fiscal situation we find ourselves in. But there's Republicans that are certainly culpable as well. There were government contracts made under the Rowland administration that certainly did not help the current situation. I don't like the idea of governors or any executive branch having the ability to make deals that outlived their tenure. You shouldn't be able to make a deal with state employees that goes out 10 or 20 years when you're only around for 4. That doesn't make any sense. And that kind of thing is what creates the problems we have now, because they figure, you know what, I'm not going to be there when the chickens come home. Someone else is going to have to deal with that problem then, and that's us. We're all dealing with it now. And I think the state of Connecticut's financial picture in the future is going to remain bleak until either one of two things happens. Mm-hmm. Either we really do crash because there is no way to pay the bills we have because our economy suffers so much and so many of the producers in our society leave, or we have someone who's really committed to take the reins and tell the truth and tell people exactly what needs to happen.
But that's why they're going after, to provide a third alternative is my theory. That's why they're going after another $1 billion tax increase in the form of tolls, because they can use that money to mitigate the damages, to make it look like the state's hobbling along, and they can sweet talk us and tell us about all the wonderful things they're doing, and then they buy off certain voters with things like paid family leave and minimum wage, and they get away with this by continuing to raise the cost of living here.
Yeah, I always equate it to how a parasite operates. I mean, a parasite like a tapeworm just keeps eating, its host until the host dies. I mean, it doesn't know or care that it's killing the host. And essentially that's what's going on. These policies are killing Connecticut. And adding tolls is only going to tell people that they are unwelcome here. If you're doing business in Connecticut, if you are in any kind of business where you have to travel a lot or use our roads or distribute products to the supermarkets or God knows what, you're being told that you're not welcome here. You're just going to keep paying to feed the hungry beast that is our state government, who has this impression that they have the right to decide who gets what. And I mean, every election tells the same story.
I got to hold you there. We've got to run to our bottom of the hour news. But thank you for being here. Check in regularly, okay?
I would like that very much. Thank you very much, Todd.
Senator Rob Sampson on WTIC.